Welcome, my bountiful friends. It's time to put on your oilskin jackets and hat and get on board the ship, because today we're going to be delving deep in the ocean as we harpoon Herman Melville's Moby Dick. The linkages with Great Expectations continue, for this story also contains a young boy called Pip. However, he is not front and centre of this demented tale. This one is centred on a humorless old man who can't get over a severe boo-boo gained at work, which drives him crazy and results in the death of just about everyone except the titular whale. As usual, I'll be diving deep into the big blue sea, and as always, there'll be as many spoilers as there are dead mariners. And there'll be plenty of opinions too, so you have been warned, me hearties. And before we begin in earnest, don't forget to like and subscribe, it's greatly appreciated. Melville began writing Moby Dick in February 1850, drawing heavily from his own experiences at sea. Between 1841 and 44, he worked as a sailor aboard whaling ships, including the Acushnet, which exposed him to the brutal realities of whaling. His fascination with the industry, combined with his extensive reading of whaling literature, shaped the novel's intricate details. One of his primary inspirations was Mocha Dick, a real albino sperm whale notorious for its aggression, which had been documented in maritime accounts. Additionally, the tragic sinking of the Essex in 1820, after being rammed by a whale, provided a dramatic foundation for the novel's climactic events. Initially, Melville envisaged the story as a straightforward adventure novel, similar to his earlier works like Typee and Omoo. However, his meeting with Nathaniel Hawthorne in August 1850 profoundly influenced the novel's direction. Hawthorne's Moses from an Old Manse impressed Melville with its depth and cosmic ambition, inspiring him to revise Moby Dick into a more philosophical and allegorical work. This transformation led to the novel's elaboration of themes such as obsession, fate, and the nature of evil, elevating it beyond a simple whaling narrative. He completed the manuscript in 18 months, a year later than he originally anticipated. The novel was first published in London in October 1851 under the title The Whale, in a 3-volume edition by Richard Bentley. This version contains numerous edits and omissions, including the removal of passages deemed too sensitive or controversial. Melville made additional revisions before the American edition, titled Moby Dick or the Whale, which was published in November 1851 by Harper and Brothers in a single-volume format. The last-minute title change reflected Melville's desire to emphasize the novel's symbolic depth. Upon release, Moby Dick received mixed reviews. Some critics praised its ambitious scope and poetic language, while others found its structure unwieldy and its philosophical digressions excessive. The novel was a commercial failure, selling only 3,000 copies during his lifetime. Ahab is the obsessed and tyrannical captain of the Pequod. His name is from one of the most notoriously wicked Israelite kings from the Bible, and his rule was marked by conflict with the prophet Elijah. Moby Dick is the legendary white whale and Ahab's nemesis. The narrator is haunted by the whale's whiteness, describing it as both beautiful and terrifying. The whale's vast power and mystery make it a symbol of sublime, an entity beyond human comprehension. To Ahab, the white whale is not just an animal, it is a force of fate, an embodiment of cosmic injustice. Ahab believes Moby Dick has deliberately maimed him, and he seeks revenge against the universe itself. This is the narrator of the novel. He is an unnamed merchant sailor. He asks the reader to call him Ishmael, and Ishmael is the son of Abraham and Hagar in the book of Genesis, and is associated with exile and wandering. Queequeg is a skilled harpooner and Ishmael's close friend, originally a prince from the fictional South Sea island of Kokovoko. He is labelled a savage by the others, but he is kind, loyal and deeply honourable, forming a strong bond with Ishmael. He follows his own religious customs, worshipping a small wooden idol named Yojo, which he believes guides his fate. Starbuck is the Quaker first mate of the Pequod. He is a rational and religious man who opposes Ahab's reckless pursuit, but the rest of the crew are too far gone to back him up, and Ahab ultimately sidelines him. Starbuck briefly considers that it is his duty to try and kill Ahab, but his moral convictions ultimately stop him. Stubb, the second mate, is known for his easygoing nature and dark sense of humour. He represents the American everyman, the core of society. He doesn't question things too much. He knows that it's his job to follow the orders of the captain and not question them, even to the point of death. Flask is the third mate, and he's short and aggressive, known for his confrontational attitude. He represents the negative and misanthropic types that permeate society. He lacks the morals of Starbuck and the amiability of Stubbs. He just likes violence and the thrill of the hunt, and he cares little about the morality of Ahab's actions, merely content to be in the thick of the action. Tash Tago is Stubbs' harpooner, and he's a Native American from Martha's Vineyard. He is described as an inheritor of the warrior-hunter tradition, reinforcing the noble savage stereotype. Despite his stoic warrior-like image, he is also a common sailor, enjoying socialising and drinking rum. He is highly skilled in whaling, often spotting the whale first and delivering precise harpoon strikes. His accomplishments are often overlooked, with Stubb and Ahab taking credit for his successes. Dagu is Flask's harpooner and is a towering African warrior. He is enormous and commanding, standing in stark contrast to Flask, who is short and hot-headed. Their pairing creates a visual and symbolic contrast. He is skilled in whaling, but his achievements are often overlooked, similar to Tash Tago. He is calm and composed, rarely engaging in the crew's philosophical debates or personal conflicts. Pip is a young cabin boy who suffers a traumatic experience at sea, leading to his mental breakdown. He is one of the most tragic and symbolic characters in Moby Dick. Elijah is a mysterious figure named after a biblical prophet that opposed King Ahab. He warns Ishmael and Queequeg on the docks about Captain Ahab and rails against the Pequod's latest expedition. He refers to Ahab as Old Thunder, hinting at the captain's dark, storm-like nature. He warns that signing on to the Pequod is akin to signing away their souls, reinforcing the novel's themes of fate and doom. Fadala is a secretive and prophetic Persian mystic who serves as Ahab's personal harpooner. He prophesies Ahab's fate several times throughout the novel, and is proven correct each time. The Pequod is the ship at the centre of the novel, and it represents the human world floating out alone on the sea of fate. It is named after a New England Native American tribe, the Pequot, who were wiped out in a short war. The name implies that it too is doomed. The sea itself is also very much a character in this book. It is a changeable elemental force that pays no heed to the actions of man and is indifferent to the fates of them. Ishmael, a restless young man seeking adventure, sets out to join a whaling voyage. He arrives in New Bedford, where he meets Queequeg, a tattooed harpooner from the South Pacific. Despite initial apprehension, the two become close friends and decide to sail together. They travel to Nantucket, the whaling capital, and secure positions aboard the Pequod, a ship captained by the enigmatic Ahab. The vessel's Quaker owners, Peleg and Bildad, warn Ishmael that Ahab is recovering from an injury, but they do not reveal the full extent of his obsession. Once at sea, Ahab finally appears, revealing his ivory leg, made from a whale's jawbone. He announces his true mission, to hunt and kill Moby Dick, the legendary white whale that maimed him. He offers a gold doubloon to the first crew member who spots the beast. The ship's officers, Starbuck, the rational first mate, Stubb, the carefree second mate, and Flask, the aggressive third mate, react differently to Ahab's obsession. Starbuck in particular opposes the reckless pursuit, fearing that it will lead to disaster. As the Pequod sails across the Atlantic, Indian and Pacific Oceans, it encounters other whaling ships. Ahab obsessively questions their captains about Moby Dick's whereabouts. One ship, the Jeroboam, carries a sailor named Gabriel who warns that hunting the white whale will bring doom. Meanwhile, Ahab secretly reveals his private harpoon crew, led by the mysterious Fadala, a Parsi with prophetic visions. Throughout the journey, Ishmael provides detailed descriptions of whale anatomy, hunting techniques, and maritime life, blending scientific observations with philosophical musings. The crew successfully hunt several whales, extracting their oil, but Ahab remains fixated on his singular goal. As they approach the Japanese seas, the ship encounters the Samuel Enderby, whose captain lost an arm to Moby Dick, but refuses to seek revenge. Ahab, however, grows increasingly unstable. One night, Pip, the young cabin boy, falls overboard and is temporarily abandoned. The trauma leaves him mentally shattered, and Ahab takes him under his wing, recognizing his own madness in the boy's ramblings. As the ship nears its final confrontation, Queequeg falls ill and orders a coffin to be built. He later recovers, and the coffin is repurposed as a lifeboat. Finally, the Pequod sights Moby Dick. Over 3 days the crew battles the whale, and on the third day Ahab harpoons the beast, but the line snags around his neck, and he is dragged to the whale and is then taken down into the depths by it. The whale then resurfaces and rams the ship, sinking it. Ishmael is the only one to survive. He clings to Queequeg's coffin until he is rescued by the Rachel, a passing ship. The novel ends with Ishmael adrift, reflecting on the destructive powers of obsession and the indifference of nature. Melville's writing style is elaborate, dense, and highly elusive, blending elements of philosophy, symbolism, and encyclopedic detail. His prose oscillates between lyrical grandeur and technical precision, creating a narrative that is both poetic and deeply analytical. The novel's structure is unconventional, incorporating sermons, soliloquies, dramatic monologues, and scientific treatises, making it feel like a bizarre fusion of epic, tragedy, and whaling manual. The language is ornate and complex, often featuring long, winding sentences filled with metaphors, biblical references, and Shakespearean flourishes. He frequently employs symbolism, particularly in his descriptions of the sea, the whale, and Ahab's obsession. His use of first-person narration through Ishmael is also highly unusual, as this character is in fact not the protagonist. He is a witness, a watcher. He is the one who tells the tale of the Pequod by virtue of his role as being the only survivor. His retelling is deeply introspective and philosophical in tone, and notably it sometimes shifts into third-person omniscience, providing broader perspectives on the unfolding drama. The novel's atmosphere is both vast and claustrophobic, reflecting the dual nature of life at sea. The endless ocean invokes a sense of isolation and existential uncertainty, while the tight confines of the Pequod creates an environment of tension and psychological intensity. The descriptions of the sea are both beautiful and terrifying, emphasizing its unpredictability and indifference to human struggles. The ocean is depicted as a force beyond comprehension. The whale itself is transcendent of any mere animal. It is the embodiment of both divine mystery and existential dread. The pacing is deliberate and immersive, with moments of action interspersed with deep philosophical inquiry. Melville's digressions into whaling lore and metaphysical speculation creates a narrative that is expansive and layered, demanding careful engagement from the reader. The result is a novel that feels both timeless and deeply rooted in its historical context, offering a reader experience that is intellectually challenging and emotionally resonant. Obsession and revenge is a very obvious theme of this novel. Ahab's monomaniacal quest to kill Moby Dick is the novel's driving force. His obsession blinds him to all reason, considerations of morality, and the well-being of his crew. He sees the whale not as an animal, but as a symbol of fate and cosmic injustice, believing that by destroying it, he can reassert control over his own destiny. His descent into madness highlights the destructive nature of unchecked obsession and leadership, showing how it consumes not only the individual but those around him. Fate versus free will is throughout this novel, and characters grapple with the tension between predestination and personal agency. Ahab believes he is fated to confront Moby Dick, interpreting sightings and prophecies as confirmation of his destiny. Ishmael, on the other hand, presents a more philosophical view, questioning whether fate is real or merely a construct of human perception. The novel suggests that while individuals may believe they control their own paths, larger forces, whether they be nature, chance, or divine will, ultimately shape their outcomes. Man versus nature. The novel portrays nature as indifferent to human struggles. The ocean is vast, unpredictable, and merciless, reflecting the insignificance of man in the face of natural forces. Moby Dick, as a symbol of nature's power, is neither good nor evil. He simply exists beyond human morality. Ahab's attempt to dominate nature is doomed from the start, reinforcing the idea that human arrogance in the face of nature can only lead to destruction. Brotherhood and isolation. Despite the novel's themes of obsession and existential struggle, it also explores companionship and unity. Ishmael and Queequeg's friendship transcends cultural barriers, demonstrating the potential for human connection even in a world filled with uncertainty. The crew of the Pequod represents a microcosm of humanity, bound together by their shared purpose, yet ultimately powerless against Ahab's will. The novel contrasts the warmth of brotherhood with the cold isolation of obsession, showing how human relationships can provide meaning in an otherwise indifferent universe. Upon its release, Moby Dick was misunderstood by contemporary readers, who expected a straightforward adventure novel similar to Melville's earlier works. Instead, they were confronted with a dense symbolic and philosophical narrative that defied conventional storytelling. British critics were generally more favourable, appreciating its descriptive power and poetic language. However, the London edition, entitled The Whale, lacked the epilogue, leading to confusion about the novel's ending. American critics were less enthusiastic, with some dismissing the novel as rambling and incoherent. The New York literary world criticised its lack of structure, while others found its biblical and Shakespearean influences excessive. The novel's length and complexity alienated many readers, and its philosophical digressions were seen as distractions rather than enhancements. Melville's reputation declined rapidly after Moby Dick failed commercially. His later works, including Pierre and The Confidence Man, were also poorly received, leading him to abandon fiction altogether. By the time of his death in 1891, Moby Dick was out of print, and Melville was largely forgotten. In the 1920s and 30s, a group of scholars and critics revived interest in Melville's work, recognising its philosophical depth and narrative complexity. This was due to a distinct change in literary tastes. By the early 20th century, readers and critics were more open to complex and symbolic narratives, making Moby Dick more appealing. Writers like James Joyce and T.S. Eliot had popularised experimental storytelling, making Melville's ambitious style more appreciated. The novel's themes of obsession, fate, and existential struggle resonated with a world grappling with the aftermath of World War I. Key figures in the rediscovery included Carl van Doren, who was a literary critic who in 1921 included Moby Dick in his book The American Novel, arguing that Melville was one of the greatest of American writers. D.H. Lawrence, the British novelist, praised Moby Dick in 1923 in Studies in Classic American Literature, calling it a book of wonder and emphasising its symbolic power. Lewis Mumford, in his 1929 biography Herman Melville, helped reframe the author as a visionary writer rather than a forgotten novelist. Today, Moby Dick is regarded as one of the greatest novels ever written, influencing countless authors and scholars. Its themes of existential struggle, human ambition, and the mystery of nature continue to resonate, ensuring its place as a timeless literary classic. When I first attempted to read this book, I DNF'd it. The story seemed overly plodding, and then there was the strange overly long episode of Ishmael waiting for Queequeg to come to bed with him, which, to be honest, seemed overly homoerotic to me. And it should be noted that this massive novel has one single solitary female character who doesn't even get to say anything. In fact, when looking at Melville's other novels such as Billy Budd and Typee, I think a good argument could be made that he was an early and influential writer within the world of gay literature. And once we do finally get aboard the Pequod, it quickly becomes clear that most of the story is wrapped up in a biblical symbolism that I simply did not have the means to decipher. And I think this is going to always be the case for anyone who isn't on top of the theological references that populate and dominate both the story and the thematic payload. Several years later, I returned to it, fresh with the required additional knowledge, and was able to finally understand just what it was trying to say. From the very start, we hear a lot about Ahab before we eventually get to meet him. He is described as being physically imposing, tall and commanding, with a powerful presence, possessing a keen mind capable of strategic thinking and decisive action. He is respected by his peers for his courage and leadership. He had a wife and child, suggesting that he once had a life beyond whaling. He faced dangers before, including typhoons and battles, proving his resilience and fearlessness. After Moby Dick bites his leg off, Ahab becomes consumed by vengeance, turning into the monomaniacal figure we experience in the novel. His physical wound mirrors an even greater psychological one. He becomes fixated on revenge, losing sight of everything else and content to take any risk regardless of the cost to himself, the ship and its crew. He is repeatedly warned throughout the course of the novel of the danger he faces and the folly of his ways by divine figures, primarily the prophet of God Ezekiel and the archangel Gabriel, who is the messenger of God. They both urge him to change course, but he refuses to listen to them. He has been personally wounded by the central force of mystery in the universe, aka God, and he refuses to humbly reflect on the circumstances and its inner meaning, instead choosing to chase God down and confront him head on. He even has his own mystical powers on hand to aid him in his quest, namely Fedallah, whose name means ransom of God, who issues a series of prophecies, none of which are good, but still Ahab will not relent in his insane mission. Ahab represents the archetype of a corrupted charismatic ruler whose hubris knows no bounds. The Pequod, which is sailing the cosmic sea of life and fate, represents humanity and its many different facets. Hence it is populated by all the different races, cultures and temperaments of the world. The crew react to their ruler's erratic behaviour in a variety of different ways, with some trying to resist him, some being so lost that they beg for his help, some so brutish that they will follow him for the thrill of the chase, and others for the lure of the coin he offers. Some follow simply because they know not what else to do. When Ahab finally catches up with Moby Dick at the end of the novel, it is the showdown between a deluded, vengeful ruler versus the cosmic creator. Regardless of how ferocious the sea captain's attacks are, no matter how much effort his crew puts in, there can only be but one result of facing the heart of universal mystery head on. The wicked ruler is dragged down to the depths, the ship is sunk, and everyone goes down with the vessel. Only the narrator manages to escape, ironically saved by a container of death. He becomes the sole survivor, forced to wander the world, relaying the story of the damned to the rest of the world as a warning. The novel is essentially a morality tale that tells us that although we will be harmed in the course of our lives, we will probably never know the underlying reasons for why such events happen to us, for they are beyond the ken of men. Rather, we should analyse, process and move on from such catalysts. For if we do not, if we instead choose to fixate and blame the world and God for our ills and pursue a course of revenge, then we will be consumed by our own hatred. The novel is also a direct warning to society. It asks whether we will permit ourselves to be led astray to our destruction at the hands of corrupt and immoral leaders, or will we have the integrity to resist and refuse them? So what are your thoughts on this nautical novel? Which character did you like the most, and which scene did you find the most profound? Once more, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell icon for more deep dives into the world of literature. Until next time, keep reading, and remember, if you find yourself at a loose end, your life drifting aimlessly, and you get the idea of joining a whaling expedition, well, don't. Go work on a community project instead. Fair winds and following seas. Godspeed.